Hello and welcome to another video. I'm so glad that you're here with me, and today you guys are going to be following along with me on a few days in my micro bakery. So my micro bakery operates on a 3 days per week basis. I'm working in my bakery Tuesday through Thursday, and this first clip that you're seeing is on Wednesday, which is always my dough day. So I prep all of my cookies and scones in labels and packaging on Tuesdays with my assistant. And then on Wednesdays, I prep all of my breads and things that involve dough and fermentation and things of that nature. So these days start very early for me. I get up at around 3:30 in the morning to start mixing. That is not always entirely necessary for every baker, but for me personally, it just works best for our family because I do have 2 young children. They are 2 and 3 years old. So I like to get the majority of my work done before they are awake, and that's just what works best for us. So it is a very, very early morning for this mama over here, but we make it through, you know? One really important aspect of baking in bulk that you guys will see here in a little bit is tracking the dough temperature. So I mix my dough in my mixer that you see to the right of the screen right now. I can mix 25 loaves at a time, and then after I take the dough out of the mixer, I still do 3 sets of coil folds, both to develop gluten, but also to ensure that the temperature of the dough is even throughout. So as I fold this dough, the temperature distributes itself properly so that there aren't any really hot spots or cold spots, because when you do mix in a big mixer, it definitely does heat the dough up a little bit from the motor. And if you have dived into the world of sourdough, you may have begun to learn about how dough temperature affects sourdough fermentation. I teach this method in a lot of detail in my ebook, which I will link down below. There are also some free resources online that you'll find, but if you want something all in one spot, it might be worth looking into my ebook as well. One of my most commonly asked questions is how do I get the dough out of my mixer and into the bins, because the bowl to this mixer is attached. This is called a spiral mixer. I have the brand called Estella, and it is a 30-quart spiral mixer. Spiral mixer bowls do not come off. Part of the reason is because the bowl itself actually spins as the spiral attachment also spins. It's ideal for bread dough, for bagels, things like that that might be really dense or hard to mix doughs. This motor is made to withstand dough of that caliber. So it's always a little bit tricky to get the dough out of the mixer, but the key to it is making sure that you mix it properly. If you mix the dough properly, it should come out of the bowl fairly easily, and I just grab it in chunks. And to give you a little overview of how I mix in my mixer, what I do is I add all of my flour and the majority of my water and starter into the bowl, and I let that mix on low for about 10 minutes, and then I let the dough rest for 30 minutes. This is where a lot of the gluten is going to be developed, and it makes it way easier to remove from the bowl. So after that 30-minute rest, I add in the last remaining portion of the water along with the salt, and I mix it on high for about 10 minutes. After that, I let it rest for another 10 minutes, and then I remove the dough from the mixer itself. So that's my process. Part of the reason why I made the switch to using a mixer as opposed to hand mixing, which is how I started. I was hand mixing until I was doing about 50 loaves per week. But a couple of reasons. First of all, this is definitely a little bit more uniform and easier once I got past the 50 loaf mark. But also, I started developing wrist issues from all of the hand mixing I was doing. It's very strenuous on your body, and I was starting to develop some pain. So definitely, if you are a baker, make sure that you're taking care of your body. It is very physically demanding work, and you want to make sure that you are preventing injuries before they even happen. Obviously, running a bakery also requires a lot of cleaning, so I included this clip to show you guys the realness of this. I am vacuuming constantly throughout the day, and that's just part of the job. This particular week that I am filming, I was preparing for a farmer's market, which is actually unusual for me. Farmers markets are not my main form of selling. I typically do pre-orders and pickups. I have a few pickup locations in my local area, and that's way more practical for me because I do have an assistant. She can deliver it to the pickup spots, and I don't have to pack up all of my goods and set up a tent and all that stuff. Also, weekends aren't really best for our family. We really like to reserve Saturdays and Sundays to spend time together as a family, and I don't like feeling nailed down to the farmer's market in order to have a regular form of income. But on this particular week, I was excited to do a market and get to see my customers in person because I don't often see them because I'm doing porch pickups. So here now we are getting ready to shape up some dough. This dough was mixed at around 4 a.m. and at this point it's probably around 10:30 a.m. that I'm starting to shape all of these loaves. For the first thing that I do is I will pre-measure each loaf into its allotted size. So my loaves are 815 grams each. And then what I'll do next is I will pre-shape it, which basically just encourages it to take the shape that I want it to, a nice round shape. It also will create a nice start to the surface tension, which is going to be really important to getting a really nice oven spring. So this right here is about 25 loaves of bread, and I am just going to go through that process with all of them. My micro bakery is only about a year and a half old, and so last summer was actually my first summer running my micro bakery, and I did do more markets last year. I didn't do them regularly, but I tried to do around 1 or 2 per month, and I thought that was really great, and I always viewed markets less as a income maker and more of a marketing tool. So I knew that I didn't want farmers markets to be my main form of selling. So every single person that came into my stand at the farmers market, I would use that as an opportunity to tell them about my porch pickups. That was really effective for me, and I was able to gain a really loyal customer base through using the markets as a marketing tool, which I loved. And it was a fun way to build community and just be a part of my local community. It was really fun for me. So I highly recommend doing that, but just make sure that you understand what you're wanting to get out of it so that you utilize that time properly to set yourself up for whatever goal you're trying to achieve. For those curious, you can see my refrigerator in the right side of the screen. I have an Insignia upright freezer. That's what it's called in the listing. You can purchase it at Best Buy, but it does have a refrigerator setting, which is what I use it on. It is 21 cubic feet, which is really big, but I can fit over 100 loaves of bread inside of this refrigerator, which is amazing. Great investment. It was less than $1,000 and I highly recommend it. I set the temperature to 1,000. I was about to say 1,000 degrees. Definitely not that. To 37 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's been really, really great for me. So after I pre-shape all of my loaves, I let them bench rest for a little while. Oftentimes, because I'm making a bulk amount, the first loaf that I pre-shaped is typically ready to be shaped by the time that I'm done with the rest of them. So I kind of just jump in, but sometimes I'll let them sit there for 10 minutes or so. But I use a couple of different shaping methods. This first one that you're seeing is a really standard version of shaping. I think it's coined like the Tartine method, which Tartine is a really famous sourdough bakery in California, and this is the method that they use. It is trusty, it is faithful. However, it's typically not how I shape my loaves. So this next loaf that I shape, you'll see that I'm using a different method. It's significantly quicker. So when I'm making a lot of loaves all at once, I do prefer this second method a little bit more. It's kind of my own version of shaping, but the method was first taught to me by Wayne Caddy, who is also a really well-known baker. And I just kind of put my own little twist on it. So you can see here, I kind of just fold it over both ways, clamp up the edges, and plop it right into the Banneton, which this is a huge time saver. It's like 10 seconds per loaf versus like 30 seconds, which when you're doing a lot of loaves makes a huge difference. When your dough is proofed perfectly, it really should not be sticky. Now, when I say this, I feel like it triggers some people because they think their dough is sticky and they're offended when I say that their dough shouldn't be sticky. So I don't know. I'm sure that we all have different definitions of what sticky is, but what I mean when I say that is that you can see I'm barely using any flour on my work surface, and the dough is not sticking to my hands. It's sticking to itself. It feels light. It feels fluffy. I like to use the word marshmallowy to describe how it should feel when it's perfectly proofed. It should not be glooping to your hands and a huge mess. That's going to be a sign of either underproofing or overproofing. So obviously this is dough, right? Like this is flour and water. It has a wet kind of texture to it, so maybe you consider that to be sticky, but it should be easy to handle, and you should not need insane amounts of flour in order to shape your bread properly. For this particular week, for the market, I made about 70 loaves of bread, and I did classic sourdough loaves, my classic sandwich loaves, and then I also did cheddar jalapeno sourdough and pesto parmesan, which were both hits. They sold so fast. I've already gone to the market now since I'm recording this voiceover, and we sold out of all of this in like 2 hours, along with a ton of scones and cookies. So it was a huge success, and it was a lot of fun. It is the next day now. So this is Friday. I said earlier that dough day was on Wednesday. I was mistaken because normally my dough days are on Wednesday, but because this was a farmer's market week, which is unusual for me, my dough day was on Thursday. So this is Friday here. Not that it really matters to you guys, but I always bake my bread the day before the market, which some people ask me about often, but so for me, my market starts on Saturdays at 8 a.m. In order for me to bake all of my bread and have it cooled enough to bag, because I am required by law to bag all of my bread individually, I need it to be baked well before 8 a.m. when I leave. So I always bake my stuff the day before the market, and it's perfectly fresh. So I started earlier this morning. I didn't get any footage of it, but I baked up all of my scones and all of my cookies. And now I'm moving on to my sandwich loaves, and I worked in order of the temperature of my oven. So my cookies bake at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, scones are at 400, and then these loaves of bread are also at 400 degrees. Then the oven will get turned up to 500, and we'll bake off the rest of the classic sourdough loaves. Now these sandwich loaves, it is a separate recipe. This is also included in my ebook that I mentioned earlier. It is a really soft, fluffy sandwich loaf. It also uses a Japanese baking method called a tangzong, which is where you cook down a portion of the flour in milk and then add that paste into the dough. And what it does is it enriches the dough without the need to add eggs or butter, which is really cool. It also extends the shelf life of the bread. So my classic sourdough loaves are really best consumed within a few days after baking them, whereas the sandwich loaf will probably stay nice and fresh for about a week or so, which is a huge selling point for my customers. For this particular market, I decided to make dark chocolate espresso sourdough scones as well as apple pie sourdough scones, both of which are absolutely delicious. I was kind of gently leaning into the autumn vibes for this September market. I am admittedly a summer gal, and autumn makes me sad. But, I'm just trying to make the most of it. I also did cinnamon raisin swirl bread that we'll bake up in a little bit, and that was super fun as well for fall. This particular day was especially easy for me because my girls had a little sleepover with their grandparents, which we try to do like once a month, which I think is so great for my girls to build those memories with their grandparents. And it worked really well for me to have this day to kind of get stuff done, film this video, because normally filming while baking is a little bit adventurous, to say the least, when my toddlers are also running around. For those of you that are new here, I use the Simply Bread oven for my micro bakery. I purchased it about 3 months after starting my bakery when I was only doing like 20 loaves per week, which was a really daunting choice to make. It was a huge vote of confidence in myself that this was going to be a real thing. And I am so thankful that I did it because it has changed my life. This oven is spectacular because, first of all, it has 3 decks that are all individually controllable, so you can change the oven deck settings so that you get a perfectly even bake every single time. And then it also has automatic steam injection, so that's why I don't have to use a Dutch oven when I am baking my classic sourdough loaves. This oven injects steam into it for me, and the quality of my bread is noticeably better when I'm baking in this oven because it seals so well that the steam is able to let the loaves open up so beautifully. So I highly recommend it. It was a huge investment, but I often get asked, like, how quickly did you make the money back? I will tell you that I made every single penny back in well under 6 months. Buying my oven really skyrocketed my business. It improved the quality of my bread, it improved the quantity of my bread, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It is so great. I've also gotten to meet the Simply Bread team a few times. I went out to California to film some content with them, and they are just such lovely people. I love that the ovens are made in the United States, that it is serviced in the United States, and so if there were ever to be something wrong with it or if I needed maintenance, it's really easy to get a hold of people. It's just all around an amazing company. I highly recommend it. I do have a discount link with them where if you use my link, you get like the accessories for the oven for free, which is like $250. So I will leave that link down below as well. If you are interested in buying the oven, I would highly recommend using my link and getting some free goodies. Just so that you know, I bake my sandwich loaves in 3/4 pound aluminum tins. They are non-stick, which I don't love, but practically it just makes the most sense when baking in bulk. Personally, I try to avoid non-stick things, but when I'm baking, 30 sandwich loaves, I need to make sure that they come out cleanly for my customers. So I do have similar ones to what I use linked in my Amazon storefront, which is always linked in the description below. I have a lot of like my favorite micro bakery supplies and things like that. I also buy a lot of things from the website called Webstront. One tip for them is I have always wanted to buy things from them, and then when you go to check out, you'll see that the shipping cost is insanely high. They have a subscription that you can sign up for to get free shipping, but the subscription is $100 per month, which is psycho. But what you can do is you can sign up for their subscription, you get 1 month free. I'll buy what I need when I have that free month, and then I'll cancel it before they charge me for the first month. So that's a little hack if you want to buy something from Webstront, but you don't want to pay the shipping. That's how you can get around it. I've gotten a lot of things from them. That's where I purchased my mixer. It's where I purchased my work tables, lots of things like that. So I highly recommend. But at this point, we moved on to the classic loaves, and you can see right now, these are my children's hands. They brought me a whole bag of chocolate chips. And who am I to deny them something as tasty as a chocolate chip? So, and then it was like, all right, you guys need to leave the room. So obviously they are not at my parents' house yet for their little sleepover, but they have gotten so used to this pace of life and are really great at playing independently, but also just being around me and enjoying the blessing of having fresh baked bread in our home, and it works really, really well for us. I love having my girls around me, even when they add a level of chaos. It's such a blessing to be able to do something that I love, that I'm passionate about, that satisfies my desire for creativity in life, and also be with my girls, because being a mom and a wife and a homemaker, those are my greatest passions in life. And so to be able to do all of it, it feels like a dream, because it really is. And I'm so thankful for the way that the Lord has blessed me to do these things in my home. I actually specifically remember that the loaves on this particular day turned out so good. Sometimes, I'm never going to sell a product that I'm not proud of, right? And I've really honed my craft so that typically my loaves all look the exact same. However, every once in a while, you just have a bake day where you're like, yes, this is good. This is what I want my bread to look like every single time. And that was one of these days. So I was really happy and proud of that, especially in the season change and things like that. Sometimes things can get a little bit spicy, when it starts to get cold out. This particular market day was so cold, and it was so random because it was like a 65-degree day smushed in between a bunch of 80-degree days. So it was like one fake day of fall. And so I was really happy with how the loaves turned out in the end. What you're seeing in this clip is my youngest daughter, June, playing with the attachment to the vacuum. Just classic things. So after during baking, I have bread baking still at this point, I started packaging up all of my scones and cookies and things like that. And that's kind of where we'll end today's video. I'm so thankful that you guys tagged along with me for a couple of days. It's so fun to be able to share my process with you guys and share just what I've learned over time as I've built my bakery and my business. I don't know it all, that's for sure, and I'm constantly learning, but I'm thankful that there's always something new to learn. It's what keeps life exciting. So if you enjoyed today's video, please make sure that you subscribe down below, give this video a thumbs up, make sure to follow me on Instagram. Also, leave a comment down below if you would be willing. It really helps me in the YouTube algorithm, and I will see you guys in the next one.